Queen Elizabeth has been laid to rest. A look at her funeral and all the touching moments. Prince George and Princess Charlotte walk in the processional. What does this mean for their future?
We will see them, I think, at state occasions, and we'll see them at events, particularly perhaps George, who one day will be doing the same thing.
And Prince Harry and Meghan Markle step out to honor the Queen. What their body language told us about how they are feeling.
I didn't see a disconnect. As a matter of fact, I saw a little bit more bonding.
And where does the royal family go from here? From rifts to Charles's future reign.
I would also say that I do think the king very much wants to heal the rift with Harry and Meghan. We saw that olive branch held out the first national address. So maybe we will see attempts to coordinate more regular visits.
We've got that plus so much more in today's Royally Us. Hello to our fellow royal lovers and welcome to Royally Us. I'm Christina, that's Christine. And Christine, this has been a historic, monumental, unbelievable week. The Queen has been laid to rest in probably one of the most beautiful ceremonies I've ever seen.
I know, it's been so emotional in so many ways, just overwhelming, I think, is one of the biggest words. And when you really take in the history, it's unbelievable.
It really is. And, you know, the royal family, world leaders, the Queen's closest staff, 2,000 people gathered to mourn the life of the Queen in a moving ceremony that we said that spanned from London to Windsor. The funeral was carefully planned out by the Queen herself and featured some moving touches, tributes, and of course, her corgis. Her reign came to a symbolic end amid the committal service at St. George's Chapel. And toward the end of the ceremony, Her Majesty's state crown, her orb and scepter, which was bestowed upon her on her June 1953 coronation, were removed from her coffin. The moment took place just moments before her casket was lowered into the vault. I mean, like we said, so many. This span from London to Windsor and the processionals, everything in between was just really emotional. I mean, was there a moment that moved you the most during all this?
I think so many people were really deeply moved seeing the Queen's fell pony standing at attention for one last time, and even saw the photos of her, headscarf draped over the saddle. And I think between that and the corgis, I just knew that the committal service was just going to push me over the edge of But it really wasn't until sort of the bagpiper was walking down the hallway that I was very deeply moved. And I'm sure that was the purpose of whoever orchestrated this incredible production. But it was overwhelming. So much history,
So much history. I mean, if it's been 70 plus years since we've last had a monarch that has had a funeral like this. And, it's probably something that a lot of people will never see again. It really is unbelievable. But, King Charles also had some touching moments too. He left a letter on the top of the casket, said, in loving and devoted memory to his mother. The flowers that were draped over the coffin had a nod to Prince Philip as well. And there was a lot of people, of course, in attendance from the royal family, the Prince and Princess of Wales, their children, Prince Harry, Meghan Markle, of course, the Queen's other children. So it was a lot of people gathered together to remember a great Queen.
It was incredible. I think even just zooming out, thinking of all the world leaders, all the kings and queens and princes from other nations, the presidents and the prime ministers, all gathered in grief for one woman. That really, I think, was incredible to think about. People who would otherwise argue politically or never be caught dead in the same room are here together to mourn the loss of Queen Elizabeth II.
And definitely the magnitude of what this means for King Charles. There was a very poignant moment that came when he took his final bow to the Queen. So take a quick look at this. I mean, this moment probably meant so much to him on so many different levels. He became emotional when they sang "God Save the King." I'm sure this was a really Unbelievable moment for him.
I think there's been, he's had such a tumultuous, the last 2 or 3 decades have been so difficult for King Charles, who was then Prince Charles. And I think he probably thought this day would never come. And, to hear God save the king, it means 2 things. It means that this day has come. It also means his mother has died. And it must be such a mixed bag of emotions.
Yeah, it's got to be so many mixed emotions. And following the ceremony, the Queen was laid to rest alongside her parents, her sister, and her late husband, Prince Philip. I mean, we don't really have any insight into what this private ceremony was like, but I can imagine, they held it together all day long, that this was probably a time for them to be emotional in the public amongst family and to maybe, share those special memories that they've had with the Queen over the years.
Yeah, this chapel, the George VI chapel is very small. If you actually look at photos of it, there was a lot of people saying, where are they even going to put them? So I don't imagine many people were there. I imagine it may have been, even if it was just the Queen's children and their spouses. So it was very private, I think very emotional. And I just, that I think was probably the final moment, because for the family, there was always one more service, one more moment. This was really the final moment for the family to say their goodbyes in private. And now they have some time now. They won't be undertaking any further engagements where they can, fully mourn.
Yeah, definitely. Well, like we mentioned before, Prince George and Princess Charlotte appeared during the processional, walking alongside their parents, the Prince and Princess of Wales. And Charlotte even took a moment to remind Prince George to take a bow. Take a look.
And this moment here where the Grenadier Guards are bearing the coffin from the gun carriage, watched by 2 Charlotte and Louis, the great-grandchildren, and they will bear it now to the royal hearse to be...
I love that she's keeping him in line, but this was, a very big moment for the 2 of them. They're 2 young children, 9 and 7, and to be on this world stage like this and also grieving their great-grandmother had to be a really, really big undertaking for them.
It's, the good news for them is that Princess Kate has such a thorough knowledge of sort of childhood development and could support them in the best ways. And obviously they have the best resources. So I have no doubt that this decision to include them was the right one for these children. But what I really liked was there were so many parallels comparing George and Charlotte supporting each other in this time, as Charles and Anne supported each other throughout so much of history. And even in the last few days, seeing Princess Anne and the now King Charles, their interactions and the way that Princess Anne supports King Charles in his new role is really moving. And I loved to think that they were trying to, support that bond for George and Charlotte.
Yeah, definitely. And you can even see, Princess Charlotte at one point became overwhelmed with grief. There's those photos of her, bursting into tears. Of course, Princess Kate was there to comfort her. But yes, you have to remember that she's only 7 years old. So this is a lot to deal with.
Yeah, and I think that you can see the children, they don't really like the photographers or the media attention. We've seen it time and time again. They really do seem uncomfortable. I think that's a testament to the fact that they lead pretty private lives. They're really not accustomed to this. So it must have been in so many ways overwhelming yesterday because 5.1 billion people were watching. I can't imagine.
Cannot imagine. But to discuss even further the magnitude of their appearance is British royal expert, genealogist, and director of content at MyHeritage, Michael Cleland. So take a look at this. How significant was it that Prince George and Princess Charlotte also participated in the processional? Was that surprising? And do you think that was ever a tough decision for William and Kate to make?
I think it was. I think that, the palace itself didn't announce that the young royals were attending until relatively late on. Right. And I think the decision was being made. I think for children of that age who might not quite understand what's going on or be able to sit through something so long and so formal, it must be quite a difficult decision to make. And I think Catherine made a statement that George understands what's happening. Some of the younger royals, the younger siblings, perhaps less so, perhaps a little too young to quite get there. So I think it was one of those moments that will be looked on. One of the big iconic things that we remember from Princess Diana's funeral was William and Harry walking behind the coffin. And that's one of those iconic photographs or video clips that everyone remembers from that funeral. And it was a moment that really forged our first early perception of those two young boys who are now, men, and they've grown up in that shadow. But I think now seeing the younger royals take this kind of role just indicates a bit that they have moved up through the line of succession. They will be more of a focus as they grow up. I think William and Harry have both been made very clear that they don't want their families to be very focused, very part of the media circus, and they want them to have a childhood and a life, and they want them to be slightly detached from what goes on in terms of royal procedure and things. But we will see them, I think, at state occasions, and we'll see them at events, particularly perhaps George, who one day will be doing the same thing. And so again, his preparation started, I guess, from the moment he's born, and will continue and will slowly increase as he gets closer to that fateful day. But I think William and Catherine have really taken their responsibilities as parents quite seriously. And they've asked that question first, I think, before that of duty and the other things, which means that, they made that decision close to the time. Once they'd perhaps weighed it over, I wouldn't be surprised if they'd even asked the children themselves if they'd like to go. I think they love very much their family, and I think they take that as their first priority.
Yeah, I feel like they're definitely going to be out and about more obviously when school allows for them to be out and about more at these royal public appearances, it seems like.
Yeah, I think it's a good time for them to sort of step into their public roles.
Definitely. Well, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, of course, were also in attendance at the funeral. During the ceremony at Westminster Abbey, he was seated behind his father. And during the ceremony at St. George's Chapel, he sat between his wife and Princess Charlotte. A lot of people were saying that it was a snub to have him behind King Charles at Westminster Abbey. A lot of people were also saying that he wasn't singing God Save the King. But, there's always all this speculation. But he's also grieving his grandmother.
Absolutely. There's a lot of emotions. There's a lot of things we don't really know or see, a lot of camera angles that maybe aren't the most, flattering, or maybe are more flattering. I actually think that Prince Harry being right behind his father actually kept them quite close, because as you said, that front row was the Queen's children, who really were bearing a tremendous grief. This is their mother. And I actually think having Harry right behind his father was probably a comfort for King Charles.
I thought so too. I didn't see a snub in that at all. I thought that was actually you couldn't get any closer to the king unless you were sitting right next to him. And I didn't think that way at all. And we recently caught up with body language expert and president of the Swan School of Protocol, Elaine Swan, to take a look at it, see if there was any tension between the family and how the rest of the royal family handle grieving in public. Take a look. Obviously, this week was a monumental, historic event with the Queen's funeral, but we also have to be reminded that this is a family also grieving and grieving in public. So what is it like to grieve with billions of people watching, and how do you think they navigated that?
I cannot even imagine what it may have felt like, but I believe that this family handled grieving in public with billions of people watching in a graceful manner. I mean, everyone really seemed to be on their best behavior as much as they could. They certainly appeared in many instances to put on a united front in order to keep everyone's focus on the Queen and her legacy.
I think particularly King Charles, it was very interesting to watch him. What did you make about his grief and his emotion throughout the funeral?
I was watching him, and what stood out to me, and I thought about this as just a regular person, you have to think about this. His father just passed away last year, and now his mother passed away, and everything is left up to him now. He doesn't, it's challenging. So you can see for me, it seemed as though it wasn't the fact that he just lost his mom and his dad in such a short period of time, but also the gravity of the responsibility and the weight of this family, the weight of the monarchy is on him. Of course, he's been very close to his mother all of his life, and I'm sure she has done everything she could to prepare him for this moment. But now this moment is here, and everything is on his shoulders. So I think we saw a grieving son, yet at the same time, an individual who understood the gravity of the leadership that's to come.
You know, you mentioned before that this is a family coming together in a time of grief. And obviously everybody's going to be looking at the body language of Prince Harry and Meghan. And it didn't really seem like there was much interaction, not just by them, but by anybody in the royal family. But did you sense a disconnect at all between them and the family?
I didn't see a disconnect. As a matter of fact, I saw a little bit more bonding. There was the very, very brief moment where William had motioned to Harry and Meghan to come and sit alongside them. I think that was a very small telltale sign for us that behind the scenes, there's certainly some healing going on.
As we know, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were there during this mourning period, and he was able to wear his military uniform as he marched behind his older brother, Prince William, as they entered Westminster Hall on September 17th. All the grandchildren took guard on the coffin. The twosome both wore their military ensembles as they took their places opposite ends of the Queen's casket. So a lot of people were saying that this was a step in the right direction, but then there was reports that he and Meghan were uninvited to the state dinner, that Harry was told of the Queen's passing only 5 minutes before the public was informed. And that actually prompted King Charles to release a statement saying the public was only informed after every family member had been informed. I mean, where do you think the royal family goes from here? I feel like this probably was a step in the right direction to, I mean, grief brings people together, and hopefully this was a step in the right direction for all of them.
I think so. I think grief does bring people together. I think it can also be very clarifying for, what you want out of life and where they may be, the relationships that they want to have or don't want to pursue. I think that this next, the next week of the rest of the royal mourning period, I don't think we'll see the royal family at all. And I hope they do take some time to grieve privately and to rest and sort of recuperate from this hugely emotional toll. But I don't know how much, I think we will see some change in one direction or the other, but I don't know, King Charles was so clear in his first speech that he fully supports Harry and Meghan in their life overseas. So I don't see, any re-entering of the royal fold necessarily, but I hope that there's a thawing of tensions, that there's sort of less of this constant, stories leaking and sort of sniping one way or the other. Because, grief it should bring people together and makes you realize what's actually important. And I think so much of what we saw Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, over the last few days, she did seem, supportive of the family, and she wanted to be a part of, like when she greeted mourners at Windsor Castle, she wanted to be a part of that process. So I hope to see some contentment from her in this relationship.
Definitely. I hope so. So like we said, we don't really know where they're going to go from here, but we can all speculate. And to help us do that is royal expert Gareth Russell. And he is going to break it all down for us. Take a look. I mean, do you think that we are going to see unification between the family?
I would really hope so, Christina. I have to say that in Britain, there is a pretty strong desire for the two brothers to reconcile. Mm-hmm. I think, for me personally, I think both the Princess of Wales and the Duchess of Sussex were note perfect at the funeral. I thought they behaved with impeccable dignity and solemnity, and I hope, and I think both of their husbands did too, but I think certainly there is an expectation and a hope that this will have brought William and Harry closer together again. That does seem to be broadly what the British public would like to see. But of course, we have to wait and see what happens. Funerals are a time when hopefully bridges can be mended or built. And yes, the king very much does want a reconciliation between himself and Prince Harry. I think hopefully we're going to see a palace administration under Charles III that perhaps is a little bit more flexible about things like the minutiae of etiquette. So we'll see. But I think most people are hopeful that the family will unite.
A lot of people were saying that it was not disrespectful, but they took issue with the placement of where Harry was sitting at Westminster Abbey behind King Charles. Did you find that to be offensive?
No, not at all. But that's the etiquette. The thing is, if you know what the etiquette is, it actually it's a place of honor. It's not to be one behind the king is actually a sign of favor. What they seem to have done with this etiquette, though, is it's not prioritizing William or Harry, really. To be very clear at this stage, the king's major concern has been to give a place of honor to his sister, Princess Anne, and for the older rules to be relaxed and to stop granting precedence and favor to male members of the family over their sisters. So we saw, for the first time, a female member of the royal family marching behind the coffin. So actually, what we were seeing really was a time for the Queen's children rather than necessarily a focus on the grandchildren. And in particular, I think giving Princess Anne her rightful place in the 21st century monarchy. Princess Anne really is her brother's confidant, and she is hugely admired in Britain for her charitable work. And we've seen that she is someone who's dealing with great heartbreak at her mother's passing. So I don't think there was a necessarily a priority about William and Harry. But what I will say is that actually where King Charles put Prince Harry is, if you look at how traditionally the royals are laid out, where Harry was put was not a snub. If anything, it was a sign of favor.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, you can't, unless you're sitting next to him, you can't get much closer.
Right.
I mean, what's next? Have you heard if Harry and Meghan, if they have left? And
we haven't heard if they have left. We do know that they're quite keen to get home. They have 2 young children back in California. We have heard that they miss them like crazy, which is obviously completely understandable. And it's worth noting, that the Sussexes obviously had not intended to stay in Europe for as long as they had until the Queen fell fatally ill and passed away. So obviously this is an unintended absence from their children for longer than they'd hoped. So we think they are quite keen to get back. But we have heard that there have been, quite a few private family receptions and suppers and gatherings. But we'll maybe hear more about that in the weeks and months ahead. But at the moment, it does seem as if they're, everyone at this funeral has been focused on honouring Elizabeth II's legacy. And the Sussexes, I imagine, will go home fairly soon, simply to reunite with their children.
All right, well, moving on to our royal history moment of the week, and many of the jewels that were worn by members of the royal family during the funeral had ties to Queen Elizabeth. So let's start with Princess Kate. I mean, what was she wearing, and how did that tie into the Queen?
She was wearing a 4-strand pearl necklace that she's actually worn before. She wore it notably to Prince Philip's funeral and also to a state dinner. That was a favorite of the Queen's, and it's almost that sort of iconic royal style. She also wore a 4-strand pearl bracelet that belonged to Queen Elizabeth, and the Queen's they're known as the Bahrain earrings. So she was just absolutely decked out in the Queen's jewels, which was a lovely tribute. And she also looked amazing.
Oh my God, she looked so amazing. and Duchess Meghan, or the Duchess of Sussex, she also wear a pair of earrings that was gifted to her from the Queen, correct?
Yes, she was wearing a pair of earrings that were gifted to her on her wedding. Meghan also once mentioned that there was a matching necklace as well. So I'm sure those pieces must be so special to her. And even Princess Charlotte wore a tiny diamond horseshoe brooch on her coat that was reportedly a gift from her great-grandmother. I love that. So it's just so sweet. Such a nice memento for Charlotte to remember her by.
I love that so much. So sweet. But now, the Queen is laid to rest. I'm sure the royal family is, taking a little bit of that time, but also looking towards the future. So now that King Charles officially is the king, what is next? So it is this Operation Golden Orb. So that will continue until he is formally crowned in a coronation ceremony, which will actually likely take place next year. Because if you remember, the Queen's coronation took place 16 months after her father's death. So he really has offered no information about his plans for the event, but it will likely reflect his desire for that slimmed down monarchy that we've been talking about for so long.
Definitely. I think there was sort of maybe an expectation that the coronation would be really quick. I actually think that the earliest would be next summer. Like we said, it's such a long process to plan for and to make it's such a grand affair. But I definitely think we'll see the monarchy shifting and changing over the next few months before that coronation takes place.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Well, we'd like to end this episode of Royally Us, and we wanted to take a look back at the final portrait of the Queen. The official royal family Instagram account wrote on Sunday, the day before the funeral, ahead of Her Majesty the Queen's funeral, a new photograph has been released. It was taken this year to mark Her Majesty's Platinum Jubilee, as she became the first British monarch to reach this milestone. Tomorrow, millions will come together to commemorate her remarkable life. Such a beautiful portrait, like they said, at the Platinum Jubilee, wearing this powder blue. She had this big smile on her face, and it looked absolutely beautiful.
It was just, it was the Queen. It was very much a quintessential portrait of her, and such a beautiful farewell.
It really was. And I loved the photo that they shared of her shortly after she was laid to rest. They wrote on Twitter, "May flights of angels sing thee to thy rest in loving memory of Her Majesty the Queen." And it is her, looks like she's like hiking up a mountain, right? Is that where, I don't know.
It looks like she's in the heath at Balmoral. So hiking through heather, it was sort of it must have been her favorite place on earth. I mean, it's just a beautiful tribute to some place that was very special to her.
Definitely. Special place to her, and a special woman to so many people throughout the world. And like we said, a beautiful, moving ceremony, and it was fit for a queen. It really was.
It was.
It was. Well, Christine, thank you so much for running down all things royals with me, as always. We would love to see your comments about this momentous week, so please leave them below, and don't forget to subscribe. We will see you next week. For more news content and exclusive interviews, make sure to hit the sub, like, and bell button down below, and visit usmagazine.com.